The moment her mother's hand closed around my wrist under the dinner table, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her grip wasn't gentle. It wasn't casual. It was the grip of someone trying to hold together a secret that was about to break everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved. If you believe in second chances, in families finding their way back to each other, and in love that survives the truth, stay with me till the end of this story. And if it moves you even a little, do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one again. My name is Daniel, and 2 years ago, I was the happiest broke graduate student in the city. I had a job interview lined up, a small apartment with a leaking faucet I couldn't afford to fix, and a girlfriend named Emily who made every hard day feel survivable. We had been together for 3 years by then, ever since we met in a college library where she was hiding from a group project, and I was hiding from my own thesis. She had this laugh that made strangers turn around and smile without knowing why. She never talked much about her family, and I never pushed. I figured every family has its complications, and hers just came wrapped in a little more silence than most. That Sunday, Emily invited me to her parents' house for dinner. It wasn't the first time. I had been there maybe a dozen times over the years, always polite, always a little stiff, her father asking about my career prospects, her mother mostly quiet, watching me with an expression I could never quite place. That night felt different from the moment we walked through the door. The house smelled like roasted chicken and something else, something like tension, thick enough to taste. Emily's father barely looked up from his plate. Her mother, a woman named Linda, kept glancing at me between bites, like she was working up the courage to say something she had rehearsed 100 times in the mirror and still couldn't get right. Dinner ended, and Emily got up to help clear the plates. That was when Linda touched my wrist and asked me, in a voice just above a whisper, to step outside for a moment. My stomach dropped instantly. In every movie I had ever seen, this was the scene where the father threatens the boyfriend, or the mother reveals the daughter is engaged to someone else, or worse. I followed her onto the back porch, the cold air hitting my face like a slap, and she closed the sliding door behind us so carefully it barely made a sound. She stood with her arms crossed, staring at the yard for a long moment before she spoke. Then she said the words that would rearrange the next year of my life. "We need to talk about my daughter. There's something about Emily you don't know, and I don't think she'll ever tell you herself." My mind raced through every terrible possibility in the span of 2 seconds. Was she sick? Was she already married once before? Had she done something unforgivable? Linda must have seen the panic on my face because she reached out and touched my arm again, softer this time, and told me to breathe, that it wasn't what I was imagining. But it wasn't small either. She told me that when Emily was 16, her older brother, a boy named Marcus, who I had never once heard mentioned in 3 years of dating his sister, died in a car accident on a rainy November night. Emily had been in the car. She survived with barely a scratch on her body, but something inside her never walked away from that wreck. Linda said Emily blamed herself for years because she had asked Marcus to drive her to a friend's house that night because the roads were bad and he hadn't wanted to go out, because if she had just stayed home he would still be alive. Linda said the family had gone to therapy together for a while, but Emily eventually shut the door on that part of her life so completely that she refused to say her brother's name out loud. She built an entire wall around that year of her life and never let anyone past it, not her parents, not her friends, and apparently not me. I stood there on that porch feeling like the ground had shifted a few inches beneath me. 3 years, and I never knew my girlfriend had a brother, let alone one she had lost in front of her own eyes. Linda's voice cracked as she explained that she wasn't telling me this to burden me or to test me, but because she was terrified. She said Emily's 25th birthday was coming up in 3 weeks, the same age her brother had been when he died. And every year around that date, Emily disappeared into herself a little more. Some years she barely spoke for days. Linda said she had watched her daughter build relationship after relationship on top of a foundation that had a hole in the center of it. And every time someone got close enough to sense the hole, Emily found a way to push them out before they could fall in. She told me I was the first person Emily had stayed with long enough that she was starting to worry the wall might actually crack, and she didn't know if that was going to heal her daughter or shatter her completely. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake replaying every moment of the past 3 years, searching for cracks I had missed, the times Emily went quiet in November, the way she flinched at the sound of screeching tires, the framed photo on her nightstand of a boy I had always assumed was a cousin because she never explained it, and I never asked. I felt something between heartbreak and shame. Heartbreak for the 16-year-old girl who watched her brother die and never got to fully grieve him. Shame that I had spent 3 years loving someone without knowing the deepest wound she carried, not because she didn't trust me, but because she had convinced herself that love and grief couldn't share the same room. For the next few days, I didn't tell Emily what her mother had said. I didn't know how. Every time I looked at her laughing at something on television or humming while she made coffee, I saw a different person now, someone carrying an invisible weight I had been blind to. I started noticing the small things Linda had described, the way Emily's smile would tighten slightly whenever a car horn blared outside, the way she always insisted on driving instead of riding as a passenger, and always did it a little too carefully, a little too slowly, like she was making a private bargain with the universe every single time. 2 weeks before her birthday, I made a decision that terrified me more than any exam or job interview ever had. I decided I wasn't going to wait for her to open that door herself, because I understood now that she might never open it on her own. But I also knew I couldn't force it open without breaking something. So instead, I did the only thing I could think to do. I asked her to tell me about her childhood, gently, over a quiet dinner at our apartment. No cameras, no pressure, just the two of us and a candle burning low on the table. I told her I wanted to know everything about her, not just the parts that were easy to share. She went quiet for a long time. I watched her hands tremble slightly around her water glass, and I almost apologized and changed the subject, terrified I had pushed too hard. But then she started talking, slowly at first, like she was testing whether the words would even come out after being locked away for 9 years. She told me about Marcus. She told me he used to sneak her extra dessert when their parents weren't looking. She told me about the rain that night, about asking him for a ride, about the sound the car made when it spun off the road, a sound she said she still heard sometimes in her sleep. She told me she had spent almost a decade believing that if she let anyone love her completely, she would eventually lose them too, the way she lost him, and that keeping people slightly at arm's length felt like the only way to survive loving anyone at all. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't tell her it wasn't her fault, even though I believed that with everything in me, because I understood in that moment that she needed to be heard before she could be comforted. I just held her hand across the table while she cried for the first time in front of me in 3 years. Really cried. Not the polite tears people show in public, but the kind that come from somewhere so deep it physically shakes a person's shoulders. I stayed there with her until the candle burned all the way down. Her birthday came 3 weeks later. Instead of the quiet, hollow day Linda had warned me about, Emily asked if we could visit Marcus's grave together, something she told me she hadn't done in over 5 years. We drove out early in the morning, the fog still sitting low over the cemetery grass, and she stood at his headstone longer than I expected, her hand resting on the cold stone, whispering things to her brother I couldn't hear and didn't try to. When she turned back to me, her eyes were red, but her face looked lighter than I had ever seen it, like she had set down a bag she had been carrying so long she forgot it had weight. That evening, Linda called me privately, her voice thick with something between relief and disbelief. She told me Emily had called her that afternoon and talked about Marcus for almost an hour, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. Linda thanked me in a way that made me feel like I hadn't done anything special at all, just the bare minimum of what love is supposed to look like, showing up and staying, even when the truth is heavier than you expected. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please don't scroll past without leaving a like, sharing it with someone who might need it today, and subscribing to the channel so more stories like this find their way to you. A year later, Emily and I got engaged in that same backyard, where her mother once pulled me aside, with trembling hands, and a secret too heavy to carry alone. Linda cried harder at the proposal than anyone else in the family, and I understood why. She wasn't just watching her daughter get engaged. She was watching the wall her daughter had built brick by brick over 9 long years finally come down, not because it was torn apart, but because someone loved her patiently enough to wait for her to open the door herself. I think about that dinner often, the one where her mother's hand closed around my wrist and changed the direction of my entire life. I used to believe love was mostly about grand gestures, but that night taught me it's really about showing up for the parts of someone that scare them the most, the parts they've hidden because they're afraid those parts will make you leave. Sometimes the people we love aren't broken. They're just protecting something fragile that survived something terrible, and all they need is someone patient enough to prove that love doesn't have to be another thing they lose. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone in your own life carrying a silent weight, please leave a comment and tell me what part of this story touched you the most. And I'm curious, from which country around the world are you watching this story tonight? Type your country in the comments below. I would love to see how far these words have traveled. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.